Doctor, let's talk about genomics a little bit, and how important is it for people to know what genes they carry?
When I wrote the books that I wrote with Ray Kurzweil, we devoted some chapters to the importance of genomics in the future. And over the past few years, since I've been doing genomics testing on patients, I'm not quite as enthusiastic about it as I was 10 years ago when I started writing this book. And the reason relates to our changing ideas about what our genes really do. And our genes are blueprints. Our genes predict what can happen to us. And what we used to think is 80% of what would happen to us was determined by our genes, and then we could affect it 20% by the lifestyle choices we make. Well, in the past 10 years, we've flip-flopped that. We now think that it's actually 20% from our genes and 80% from our lifestyle choices. There are a few genes that will predict something will happen to you. For instance, there's a BRCA gene, breast cancer gene, that dramatically increases a woman's risk of breast cancer. And if we do the gene tests and we find out that a woman has a BRCA1 gene, then some steps really should be taken to deal with that, because the odds of her developing breast cancer, we just don't know how to turn that gene off. There's another gene, for instance, ApoE gene. This is a gene that determines what our relative risk is of developing Alzheimer's. Well, if we find that we have, it comes in three varieties: ApoE2, which is protective against Alzheimer's; ApoE3, which is neutral and the most common one; and ApoE4, which increases risk of Alzheimer's. If we find that we have the ApoE4 gene, one copy of it, we know that we have triple the risk of developing Alzheimer's. And if we have two copies of it, we have 6 to 10 times the risk of developing Alzheimer's. There are still things that we can do, lifestyle choices that we can make to decrease the chance that we'll get that. And even though we have these genes, so it's good to do the testing to find out, but what's more powerful is taking the lifestyle choices that will abolish that.
So if we're predisposed to a certain condition, and you mentioned a couple with breast cancer, Alzheimer's, it's not an end-all be-all then, right? I mean, you hear about instances of women who have breast cancer in their family, and they, as a preventative, get a mastectomy. There's things we can do outside of that, though, right, to increase our chances?
Yeah, there are. And when we talk about that specific breast cancer gene, that BRCA1 gene, that one is such a big risk factor that actually what the recommendations are for women to have their children and then have a prophylactic mastectomy, because there's just too great a chance. We can't rely on lifestyle choices and proper diet and things like that. It's just too big a risk. Now with something like Alzheimer's, yeah, there are lifestyle choices and medications and supplements we can take to reduce our chances. So it really depends on what that gene tells us in terms of what we're going to do.